Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. I, 31, am the youngest of my dad's 4 children, and I'm the only child of my mother. By the time I was born, my siblings were grown, moved out, and had their own lives. My mother has a disease that she has battled my entire life, and honestly, it is amazing that she is still living as the doctors never gave her this long. Neither of my parents are wealthy. Heck, they don't even have a 401k, but they played their cards right and they are completely debt-free. This fortunate move has allowed them to live a comfortable lifestyle, even able to put back money for projects my father wants to do on his land. With that said, when I was 21, they gave me 30 acres of raw land of their 80 acres as an early inheritance. When they did this, they told me it was because in the worst case my mother's health gets even worse and requires extensive care which they couldn't afford, and the hospital would have to in that case put a lion on the farm and steal my inheritance. My father said this was very important to him given the fact that when my sisters still lived at home, he had an extremely well-paying corporate job and they got anything and everything they wanted. In contrast, when I came along, he and my mother sold almost all they had, quit their jobs, and built a house on some land with the intent of living a more simple life and off the land. In doing such, this meant that most of my childhood my father was self-employed, and since he couldn't afford help, I was the help. So I worked for free 90s of the time for my dad, as it was the responsibility of the family as a whole. Since it was all I had ever known, it along with many other things, mostly religion, society norms, etc., seemed normal. I now know it is not. Not long after being given the land, I started building a house on the land. There was a lot of things that happened between then and now, but that is a whole series of stories that I will not include here but may do so on my profile, if anyone is interested. Fast forward to present day. I am happily married with our first child living in a house that my wife had bought before we had gotten together, as the house I had started on 10 years ago is still not complete. As I said, a lot of craziness in the last decade, LOL. When my wife and I had gotten married almost 2 years ago, I guess my parents assumed we would finish that house and live on that land in order to be next door so they could enjoy their grandchild. I know it's healthy for a child to have her grandparents part of their life. I have some severed trust issues with them due to not only the cult-like upbringing I had, but also the fact they are friends with and make excuses for a convicted pedo that raped his own daughters. I've tried talking sense into my parents on this matter, but it always turns into a screaming match with them saying they raised me better than this and to forgive all who trespassed. Yeah, some things I'm not going to forgive or look over. Recently, I informed my parents that my wife and I are currently house shopping and are hoping to get a bigger house for our growing family. Well, as you can imagine, this conversation got interesting as my father said, "You have almost a new house that's almost done on the land I gave you. You can finish it and live there." When I told him we decided that was not what we wanted to do, he backhandedly suggested that my wife was manipulating me so that she can have the house she wants. He also said that they gave me that land with the understanding that I was going to raise my family on it in the same way they raised me right down to religious matters. I reminded him that the reason he and my mother said they were giving it to me was so a hospital wouldn't get it, looking that seems like such BS. He basically called me a liar, and that whatever my wife and I decided to do with the land, it should be included in the conversation as it directly impacts him. While the land is next to his, there is no way it can impact him as he has their own water, electric services, and road frontage access. On top of that, my parents also harass my wife daily for pics and videos of our child, and even request that she send them pics of the baby in certain clothes. As alluded to above, there is way more to the backstory, but needless to say, in recent years, I've had the desire to move farther away from that land. But this level of entitlement from my parents has just about solidified it for me. So should he and my mother have a say in what my wife and I do with the land and unfinished house? It's all fully paid for and valued at over $350 cash. Edit. Wow. Just wow, I am absolutely blown away by all the words or encouragement and advice that I've been given here over the last 24 hours. Thank you so much. One point of confusion I noticed is the land ownership, so please let me clarify. Back when I was 21, my parents had hired a surveyor to section off part of their farm to give to me as an early inheritance, and it is in my name and my name alone, and it along with the house is 100 and paid for. Also, the house is still undone as life has not been simple in those 10 years. 2 divorces, 3 miscarriages with my first wife, and a stint in the military. When I got with the woman that is now my wife, she wasn't keen on moving into a construction site, especially when she had already bought a house, and I can't blame her. Again, thank you all for the input and outward perspective. I will keep you all posted when something new happens, and since there has been some interest, I may post some things about my weird, best word I can think of for it, upbringing, especially when it comes to religion. Sheesh, I'll need a few drinks for that post, lol. Thank you all again. Cheers. I was pushing 40, and I'd learned a lot of lessons in more than 10 years of legal practice. But one of the most important lessons I learned was from an older lawyer that I worked for as a summer student after the second year of law school. A lawyer has 3 duties, he told me. First to himself, second to the court, and last, the client. Always make sure you come first and the client comes last. The reason? Because clients will screw you, he said. They'll throw you under the bus without thinking twice. I should have stayed with this lawyer, but being young and an idiot, I had to go work downtown, and I'm still downtown now. But fortunately for me, I remembered this lesson, and it came in handy many years later when a client really did try to throw me under the bus. My client was this mid-sized company that did this and that and owned things here and there. Not big enough to be listed, but it did have a pretty sizable real estate portfolio, and one day a building they owned burned to the ground. The company wanted to collect on the insurance, so they told Frank, a veteran salaryman, to deal with it. Frank was close to 60 and thought he knew what he was doing. He didn't need me to help him with the insurance claim, he told me. He had everything under control. Besides, lawyers are expensive. Some guys really get off on not paying legal fees, and Frank was one of those guys who gloated over every penny that he managed not to pay to the lawyers. I dealt with Frank a lot, and he was always nickel and diming me. The insurer is going to screw you, I told Frank. It was only by luck that I even knew about the fire and the loss because Frank had not asked for my help. He just let it slip one day, and since then I'd kept on top of him, trying to get him to smarten up. I had to fight to get him to send me the proof of loss form to make sure he hadn't messed that up. Frank screwed up a lot, and I wondered sometimes how he had a job. But the proof of loss was okay, at least, so that was one less thing to worry about. You don't know that, he said. I could tell he just wanted to get me off the phone. I'm paid to know when insurers are trying to screw my clients, I said, and the insurer is going to screw you. They've been stringing you along for ages with requests and questions and paperwork, but they aren't going to pay you. Not unless you sue them. But Frank said he knew what he was doing, that it was all under control, and besides, he got along with the adjuster so great. The limitation period expires in 2 weeks, I said, and once that 2 weeks pass, it will be too late to sue. The moment that limitation period expires, they will stop taking your calls. You'll get a final email saying, sorry, you're out of time, and that will be that. Don't leave this till the last minute. Let me sue right now, and you'll have the money in no time. Frank was like, sure, fine, whatever. Don't bother me. I got this blah, blah, blah. And he got off the phone as soon as he could. I sent him the usual email with clear warnings and recommendations, which he ignored. I sent the email again, and then again as the limitation period approached, and again a couple of days before the deadline. I'm going to be at trial and you won't be able to reach me, my final email said, but you have to sue. You have other firms on your list, so pick one and sue. He didn't bother to reply, and I went off to do my trial. The trial lasted a couple of weeks, and no email from Frank. Then a month passed, and another month, still no email. I figured he must have sorted things out. Maybe Frank was right after all, I said to myself, and then my phone rang. It was Frank. Remember that fire insurance thing we spoke about? We'd only spoken about it like a dozen times. I figured he was calling up to gloat, so I cut to the chase. So they paid out. That's great, Frank. You were right. You were right. He asked me what I was talking about, and could he see a copy of the claim? What claim? I said. The claim against the insurer. You know, that claim. Does that mean the insurer didn't pay? I said. He hung up on me, and then a few minutes later my computer dinged, and there was Frank's email talking about how we spoke, and he told me to sue, and he was worried when I hadn't sent him a copy of the claim, so he was following up to get a copy of the claim. I emailed him back. I take it that the insurer didn't pay you just like I told you they wouldn't, and now that the limitation period is expired, They told you to jump in the lake, leaving you with a loss in the millions. Is that it? I made a mistake by not going over Frank's head when he wouldn't listen to me. But if I'd gone over Frank's head, I never would have received another file from him, so I didn't. But that was then, and this was now. So I CC'd Frank's boss and his boss's boss, plus I CC'd Bill, the client's in-house counsel. Bill acknowledged my email right away and called me later that day. Frank messed up, he said. We know that. He's an idiot. So what do we do? So his excuses didn't work? Nope. Bill explained that they'd summoned Frank to a boardroom, but his story didn't add up, given all the warnings I'd sent him. Besides, there would have been no reason for him to keep emailing the insurer if he'd told me to sue. Once the file goes to legal counsel, Frank's role was over. The company knew Frank was bullshitting them. So that's it then, Bill said. We just lost a couple of $1,000,000. It's okay, I said, explaining that when I realized that Frank was going to mess up, I issued a claim against the insurer. Because I'd made Frank send me the proof of loss a while earlier, I had enough information that I could sue to preserve the cause of action. Not a great claim and short on detail, but good enough. You sued without instructions? Bill said. Lawyers aren't supposed to sue without instructions, because if you do that, you're personally liable for whatever costs the other side incurs. It's a big deal to sue without instructions. Yep, I said, I sued without instructions. I pulled up a copy of the claim and emailed it to him as we spoke. It's a little rough, I said, but we can always amend. Thank God, Bill said. Can I leave it with you? Of course he could. The insurer was a sitting duck, and I knew I'd collect from them, no problem. A few days later, I got a call from another guy who worked for the client, a guy I didn't normally deal with. They had a situation and needed my help. I usually deal with Frank, I said. What's up? What was up was that Frank got called into another meeting, and they handed him a one-page letter, and then he put his little office things in a box, and security walked him past his coworkers to the elevator and escorted him downstairs to the parking lot. Bye, Frank. He was too old to get another job, or at least not a decent one. It was a life-changing event for Frank, but for me, he was just an anecdote, a cautionary tale that I tell young lawyers sometimes over beers, maybe too often because I'm getting on in years and I have my favorite stories. I wasn't trying to get revenge on Frank, not at all, and I would have felt a bit sorry for him if he hadn't been trying to throw me under the bus. But the guy who replaced him was great and never nickel and dime me, so it was all good. This happened 5 years ago. My friend from college, Gia, got engaged and was getting married in Puerto Rico. He invited me and my other 2 college friends. Let's call them Amy and Sherry. When they got engaged, Sherry went on a tangent about how he was a terrible guy, not good enough for Gia, and decided she wasn't coming to the wedding and told Gia so. It was a bad fallout. FYI, he's terrific. She was jealous and other things not pertinent to the story. So Amy and I decided to travel without her and make a whole vacation of it. We decided we wanted a relaxing vacation with an upscale hotel, daily visits to beaches, and must have good food and pina coladas in our hands at all time. Sherry and Gia had made up after a long talk, and Sherry wanted to join us. In fact, she wanted to derail our entire trip. Sherry didn't want the same vacation as Amy and I. She wanted a cheap Airbnb, adventurous excursions, and was on a tight budget. I had just recovered from a terrible injury and was extremely limited with my mobility and couldn't hike beyond my feet for long periods of time. We tried compromising with hotels and activities, but she refused. So we decided that Amy and I would book the hotel we wanted, and she got a disgusting Airbnb down the street. I put my card down for everything with the agreement they'd Venmo me later. Big mistake. I paid for the rental car in San Juan, but Cherie needed it more than us so she could do her activities. Fine, just drop us off at the beach. She left us stranded for hours. When she got us, she wanted to smoke pot in the car. I'm like, no, you're driving and it's under my name. I'm not getting penalized. She started getting passive-aggressive with me and Amy. We went to see some caves one day, an activity we compromise on that I was physically capable of doing. I was driving and she was giving me directions. She kept missing to tell me when to exit. She was stoned, and she snapped at me calling me stupid and that I was doing it on purpose. I saw red and told her to shut the F or give me directions properly. She said I wasn't allowed to talk to her like that, and I said, now you know how it feels. Awkward the rest of the trip. When we fly to our next location, the wedding destination, she's become so much worse. I once again pay for the golf cart we rented for the tiny island. Highly recommended. First night there, she's being a brat, so Amy and I escape to get food and bring it back. I called Cherie saying I found a bodega across from the restaurant and asked what she wanted for our house stay. When I brought everything back, she said I forgot items and started in on me with, "Where's the cheese? What am I going to eat my eggs with? What am I going to drink my rum with? Where's the Coke? What am I going to drink my rum with?" I had it and point blank asked what I did to receive such a negative attitude. She passively aggressively played dumb. Then after pushing her for answers, she started calling me names and belittling me, so I walked out. We ended up not talking the rest of the trip, and I upgraded my flight so I didn't have to sit with her. When it was time to pay me back, she pulled this shit. Me. "You owe me $75 for the golf cart." Cherie. "Well, you owe me for gas, so really, I only owe you $50. Me. Not wanting to argue. "Fine." Cherie. "But since I purposefully tried to not travel in the golf cart to avoid you for being a bitch, I should only pay you $25. Mind you, she was in it every day. Me. "Keep your money, you." Many choice words followed. She blocked me, so I lost it, emailed her more choice words, told her we're never going to be friends again, and that nobody wanted her at the wedding, especially the mother of the bride and the groom in the first place. Amy and Gia cut ties with her, and none of us have spoken to her since. I may have lost a friend, but the silver lining here is that I met my now husband at the wedding, lost a shitty person, and gained an amazing person. Man, it was one of those hungry days, you know. The kind of day when your stomach's growling louder than a freight train, and you'd trade your left arm for a bucket of crispy, golden fried chicken. So, there I was, cruising in my trusty old beater with my buddy, Jake, when that chicken craving hit us like a truck. We looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Jake just grinned. "KFC, my man. We're making a beeline for some finger-licking goodness." We pulled into the KFC parking lot, excitement building as the scent of fried chicken wafted through the air. I could almost taste that secret blend of herbs and spices. We grabbed our buckets of chicken and sides, got back in the car, and parked up in a quiet corner of the lot. The plan was simple, just devour our spoils in peace. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. No sooner had I taken my first juicy bite than a wild Karen appeared. I mean, this woman came out of nowhere, and she wasn't having any of it. She stormed over to my window, her face red as a ripe tomato, and started going off about how I was munching on innocent chicken. I was so taken aback, I nearly choked on a drumstick. "You do realize you're supporting animal cruelty, right?" Karen exclaimed, her eyes practically shooting lasers of indignation. She was all worked up, waving her finger at me and Jake. Now, here's where it got real weird. This lady, who was on a high horse about animal rights, was decked out in a leather jacket. I mean, if you're going to preach about animal rights, maybe don't be draped in animal hides, right? I couldn't help but chuckle, and I muttered to Jake, "Check out her righteous leather jacket, man. That's some commitment to the cause." Karen must have heard me, and that's when things took a turn for the crazy. She got all up in my grill, her voice shrill with righteous fury. "Leather's different. It's not the same." I raised an eyebrow, not even trying to hide my sarcasm. "Yeah, right. Leather's totally plant-based, isn't it?" Jake and I exchanged a look. We couldn't believe this was happening over a couple of chicken meals. Karen, she was getting more agitated by the second. She didn't appreciate my sense of humor one bit. With a snarl, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She drew back like a coiled spring, and before I knew it, she tried to punch me through the car window. I guess my comment was a bit too much for her to handle. Her fist met the window with a loud thud, and I thought, well, that's one way to make an impression. The glass held up, but her hand didn't. She winced in pain, cradling her bruised knuckles. Now, here's the kicker. I'd seen enough episodes of Cops to know what to do in a situation like this. I whipped out my phone, dialed 911, and reported the assault. While I was on the line with the dispatcher, Karen was still fuming. She realized she'd just made a big mistake, and she was trying to act all cool about it, like she hadn't just tried to punch me through my car window. The cops showed up in what felt like record time. I told them the whole story, from the chicken craving to the leather jacket lecture to the attempted punch. They couldn't help but stifle a few chuckles, but they were professional about it. They took statements from both me and Karen, and it didn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out who was in the wrong here. Karen, probably realizing she was in a jam, tried to argue her case. She was adamant that my taunts had driven her to this point, which was a weak argument at best. The officers weren't buying it. They looked at Karen, her leather jacket now more of a fashion statement than a symbol of animal rights, and shook their heads. I could tell they'd seen their fair share of bizarre situations on the job, but this had to be up there. They issued her a citation for property damage, which meant she had to cough up the cash to fix my car window. Talk about instant karma. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. Many years ago, I was a broke kid just out of high school who had no plans for college at the time because I was sick of school. I moved in with a friend, but he lived in what was an economically depressed area at the time with very few job prospects for a guy like me. I was young and willing to do just about anything for hourly work after 8 months of mostly being supported by my friend, like a real friend will do for you. I tried to apply anywhere I could, but almost no one was taking applications. I stumbled across an ad for a job in a construction-related trade, and at this point I was ready to do anything to stop being a burden. There was no real interview. I was new, so I was going to start out making minimum wage and they would be able to give me cash, which was great since I didn't even have money to open a bank account. I thought that this probably meant it was an under-the-table type of job like the couple other bad commission jobs I'd tried since I got there, but figured, screw it, at least I've got a job that pays hourly. The first day I show up to the shop at the scheduled time and they ask if I had my own tools. Of course not. I don't have any money. I had to borrow from my friend to get gas just to work the first 2 weeks. This was no problem, and they handed me a stack of new tools for my first day. I was also handed a time card and told to wait outside while each crew's supervisor was given their instructions. The supervisors gave us rides to the various job sites in the company vehicles. Everyone was told what to work on, and I was trained on what to do. My work was periodically checked by the supervisor. When the supervisor decided we were done for the day, we were all taken back to the shop, turned in any extra materials, and went home. And so it went every day for the next 2 weeks. If I needed a breathing respirator or eye protection, they'd hand it to me. Another tool. No problem. At the end of the second week, I confusingly received a check for my first week of work, and it was a lot less than expected. There wasn't an earnings statement, so I figured maybe I was wrong and they had taken out taxes. I was just happy to be able to pay for my own gas and take my friend to dinner as an underwhelming thank you. I asked them about the cash, and they promptly took the check back and handed me the amount. The next week, my check was a lot closer to the amount of money I expected, so they obviously hadn't taxed it. I was a bit confused, so I asked why my first check was short. That's when I found out I had bought all my supplies from them, and the money was taken out of my pay. I'd already seen one guy fired for questioning them on a job site, so I wasn't about to press the issue or ask more questions. Now, I'm not a stupid guy, and if I had more sense at the time, I would have run far away. I should have known better, but again, I was young, uneducated, had a job in a time when it was hard to find one, and was finally able to pay my own way. Then I was stuck. I was working to make enough money to eat, have a roof over my head, and buy gas to get to work and earn another check. Sure, some of it was my own doing and wasting some money here and there, but the rent was almost 2 weeks' pay by itself. Car insurance, utilities, and a phone were most of another week of pay. Gas and food every week accounted for most of the fourth week of pay, and whatever was left went to liquor, beer, and small guilty pleasures. I say this only to illustrate the situation I found myself in and why the last thing I was going to do was up and quit my job. I tried to look for another job when I could, but unfortunately, when you were working a long distance from home, from early morning to late evening, including drive time, and making just enough money to get by, you can't just take off work to go for an interview. This was my new life. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became a year. Over time, I came to find out who all my coworkers were. The meth heads, the alcoholics, the guys fresh out of prison, who usually fit one of the 2 previous groups even on probation, and a number of illegals. Some were jerks, the alcoholics. Some were really nice, the illegals. Some were just there to make it another week. Side note, before I get hate for using the word illegals, I don't hate illegals, just don't bother trying to tell me they are undocumented because that is just a PC word for illegal. I had done some harmless but illegal stuff in my past as well, but not been caught, so I wasn't one to judge them on an equally harmless act. These guys were almost all nice, friendly people, and I liked them. We were all just trying to get by. We talked about their living situations. how they sent most of their money back to their families, what family they had here, why they came illegally, so on and so forth. I laughed right along with their stories of the free vacations to see their families when they would be deported before hopping the border and coming back to work a couple months later. I also felt sad right along with them, and they would tell me about their problems. The entire point is, this guy loved employing the type of people who wouldn't fight back about their low pay, and who probably weren't going to file taxes. I had less than $100 saved at the end of the year and was about to learn what I'd really gotten myself into. In February, I was handed a tax statement, a 1099. I didn't think anything of it until April came around and I knew I had to do my taxes. I filled in the forms, used the tax tables, calculated things up, and holy cow. In case you didn't know, when you get a 1099, you are working as a contractor, or basically, you own your own business. Since you own the business, you not only need to pay your own taxes, but also all of the employer portion of the taxes on everything you made. I owed a couple $1,000s with almost nothing to my name. I just gave up. I already expected I was going to be a tax evader by taking under the table pay. There was no way I could make the payments for what I owed. So I just didn't file taxes. It wasn't long before I figured out that most of the other contractors were in the same boat, some of them for many, many years without filing taxes. 1 year became 2. 2 became 3. I hated that job and I hated the guy we worked for. We were being worked into the ground for very little pay while the owner made money hand over fist. He would stretch the cheapest materials as far as possible. He made us buy our supplies and safety gear from him because if you didn't have it on hand, you were fired, and generally found any reason he could to keep money out of our checks. Overtime didn't exist because they considered us contractors. We had to work until they said we were done, based on the expectations they made on the supervisors. Because most of the guys were undereducated, illegal, or drug users, he knew they weren't going to say anything to anyone. By the time you account for all the tax burdens he transferred to us, we were probably making around $4, or with supervisors making around $6 an hour. The 3rd year in, I received a small amount of money unexpectedly. The job market was a lot better, so I applied for as many jobs as I could and lined all the interviews up for the next week. The money was enough for me to take that week off, and I lucked out with a new job. I quit immediately and started making a reasonable pay. When the end of the year rolled around, I had a W-2 and another 1099. I knew I had a problem. I started combing through IRS documents to figure out just how deep I was. Back, file, pay penalties, and interest. The IRS would keep all my taxes, and I would still owe about $5,000, which I could make payments on. At my current pay and what I could afford, I would probably be making payments for at least the next 5 years with the interest. One day, as I was agonizing over the approaching deadline to file, one of the IRS documents sparked an important question. What made me a contractor? Turns out, according to the IRS definition, I probably wasn't. Since I was told when I had to work, when I could leave, where to work, what to do, all work was supervised and training was provided, all these things added up to it looking like it would be determined I was an employee. Armed with this information, I filed my tax forms and immediately started a dispute process with the IRS. I made sure to be clear that all of the employees were in the same situation. At best, I hoped I would be just a little less screwed on how much I owed. Things worked out better than I had planned. The owner tried to dispute it, but my story was too compelling. The IRS found in my favor, and I was able to amend all of my previous returns. I still owed the penalties and some taxes for not having filed on time, but it was nothing compared to my old employer. He and his business were audited, then slammed with a ton of fines and penalties. His name and business were ruined. The last I heard, he was doing small, odd jobs. As an independent contractor, all I could think was, enjoy the taxes, you jerk. I'm active in a local scholastic chess organization. We set up some formal lessons, provide a place for kids to play or study chess in a more casual setup, and occasionally organize tournaments. We work through the local school system so we get something of a leg up compared to other similar organizations, as we have venues, some advertising, and a degree of administrative work already done with the schools themselves. I played with this league as a kid myself, and now that I'm an adult, I do some volunteer work for them. Last Sunday, we had a tournament, 5-round Swiss System G30, so this was an event that lasted most of the day. I was running the under-12 division, which is mostly making sure the kids don't claw each other's eyes out, getting things set up and cleaned up after it's done, and doing the pairings as each round finishes and the next one ends. Because it's an all-day affair. While some parents stay all or most of the time, it's far more common for parents to just drop their kids off in the morning and pick them up at 4:30 when things finish. So when things were wrapping up and I was handing out trophies for first, second, and third place, Kay, our second place trophy winner, had no parent in sight and was just kind of awkwardly holding his bag and his trophy looking around. Parents are supposed to be there by 4:30, but we had about 80 kids in just my division of this tournament. So I knew that the odds that at least one will be late are pretty high, and I wasn't worried. Asked the kid if he had a phone, he didn't. Asked if he knew how to reach one of his parents, got his mom's number. Called, went to voicemail, left a message reminding her that the tournament was over and she needed to pick up her kid. I can't leave if there are any children still there, so I got to doing cleanup, which the kid offered to help with. Took maybe 20 minutes to pack everything up, still no sign of Mo. I still can't leave, so I got one of the sets back out and asked if he wanted to play a casual game or do a puzzle or anything. He asked if we could go over some of his tournament games, and we spent the next 20-25 minutes analyzing one of his games from the tournament. I'm no grandmaster, but I'm a pretty strong player, so even though he won this game, there were quite a few errors in his play, and I was trying to demonstrate what he could have done better. Kid takes instruction well, and is actually marking notes on his score sheet. Note for people who don't play chess. In tournament games, you write down each move after you make it on a sheet of paper. This is primarily so there's a record in case there's a dispute as to what the position is in. It also helps you review the games later, like we wound up doing. Our analysis is interrupted by a woman's voice shouting, "You there?" "What are you doing with my son?" I look up and we have our entitled mother. She didn't look like a typical Korean, but she definitely had the tone and mannerisms of one. I got up, congratulated her son in front of her for taking second place in the division, and explained how we were going over one of his games while we were waiting for her to show up. Kid chimes in with how I helped him realize a few mistakes, and you could see gears turning in EM's brain. After a second, she bellows out, "You can't do that to a kid. If you mix positive messaging and negative messaging, you'll give him a complex." I know what I'm talking about. I have a degree in psychology. That took me off guard, but I wanted to finish cleaning up and go home. So I just said how it's already past 5 and I wanted to finish cleaning up, and I was sure Kid wanted to get home. Surprisingly, EM didn't want to stay and pick a fight further, simply getting her kid and leaving. I figured that was the end of it, not a pleasant experience, but a short one. Well, I was wrong. She sent our organization 21 separate emails demanding that I be fired. Her degree in psychology lets her know how damaging I could be to her precious boy, and how I'll rob him of any desire to keep playing by confusing him. It's apparently abusive to tell a child that even though he won a game and that's great, there are better moves he could have played during that game to improve his play. She's already went through this kind of crap with a coach her husband hired for the lad. She fired him, and now she wants the league to fire me too. Today's emails have taken a new tone. She must have found out somehow that the kid helped me clean up, because instead of strident demands I be fired on the basis of the profound psychological harm I have done to her kid, they now claim that we violated child labor laws and shall report us to the state labor board. But she'd be happy not to if they take the reasonable step of dismissing me. I know there are nutty parents around chess, but this is the first time I had prolonged close exposure to one. I'm not worried at all, but I feel bad for the kid. He was nice and respectful, and a part of me wonders where he gets it from, since it certainly isn't from his mother. And no, he wasn't showing any signs of distress from me analyzing a game with him. I've been working as a cashier at a local grocery store for a while now, and I thought I'd seen everything. But this past Saturday, I encountered an entitled mother, EM, that left me both frustrated and baffled. Here's what went down. The store had a flurry of customers due to it being the day right before the Super Bowl. I'm manning a 14 items or less register right in front of the hot food section, which is always a hot spot for customers seeking a quick bite. At my store, the hot food is weighed so that a customer can choose how much food they want depending on how hungry they are. Sounds straightforward, right? Apparently, not for everyone. In comes EM with her son, around 7 or 8 years old, happily digging into a container of hot food that's clearly half empty by now. They approach my register, the son still eating, and I brace myself for the conversation I know I'll have to initiate. As I'm scanning their items, I leave the hot food for last, mentioning, I'll need to weigh this, please. EM dismissively waves off my comment. Oh, my little angel was just so famished. I had to let him start. Just weigh what's left, darling. I'm trying to keep my professional cool here. I'm really sorry, but we need to charge for the hot food before it's consumed. Since it's been partially eaten, it's difficult to charge accurately now. You'd think I had just declared war. EM's demeanor shifts as she launches into a rage. This is absolutely absurd. My baby is hungry, and you're telling me you'd rather have a child starve than break a silly store policy. What kind of monster are you? Feeling the situation slipping, I suggest, let me call a service leader to see what we can do about this. As we wait for my service leader, SLL-EM doesn't miss a beat, turning to her son. Don't worry, sweetie. Mommy's going to make sure you get to eat. These mean people won't understand how hungry you are, but I do. My cell arrives, and after I quickly explain the situation, he turns to EM with a calm yet firm stance, reiterating the policy and suggesting that in the future she should consider paying for the food first to avoid any issues. EM is not having it. This is unbelievable. You are all completely unreasonable. I'm trying to take care of my child here, and you're all heartless, she exclaimed. Turning back to her son, she coos, It's okay, baby. We won't come back here where the bad people don't let you eat when you're hungry. With that, she leaves the cart behind, full of cold items that need to be put back quickly and leaving the half-eaten hot food behind, and storms out, proclaiming over her shoulder about how we've lost a customer and she'll be telling all her friends about our cruel policies. My SL thanks me for trying to handle it well, and we both have a good laugh about the situation. The rest of my day was a blur of scanning items and greeting customers, but my mind kept replaying the encounter, astonished at the lengths some parents will go to baby their children, even to the detriment of understanding and respecting simple rules in merchandise. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.